Ecological Design, Detailed Chapter Summary. Preface. Van der Rijn and Cowan argue that designing for sustainability demands deep ecological literacy. We must abandon machine-based metaphors and approach design as part of living systems, infusing architecture, engineering, and agriculture with ecological awareness. Their purpose is to unify disparate green efforts under a coherent ecological design philosophy. Acknowledgements. The authors express gratitude to pioneering thinkers, institutions, and partners who shaped ecological design, emphasizing the cross-disciplinary conversations at the heart of their work. A 10-year retrospective, reflecting on the decade since the first edition, they note that ecological design has advanced from fringe concept to practical strategy across disciplines. New examples and emerging ideas are woven into an updated text, while core principles remain vital for sustainable futures. Part 1, Bringing Design to Life. Chapter 1, Sustainability and Design. This chapter sets the stage by defining ecological design as design that minimizes environmental harm by aligning with living processes. The authors introduce 3 key strategies: conservation, regeneration, and stewardship as foundational to ecological thinking, and argue that these must inform every design decision. Chapter 2, An Introduction to Ecological Design. Van der Rijn and Cowan assert that our culture's dominant machine-based epistemologies underpin harmful design practices. They propose reframing design through interconnections, context, and multi-scale thinking, where even small interventions resonate across systems. Chapter 3, Nature's Geometry. The authors explore how natural fractal patterns, from root networks to tidal designs, can inspire efficient forms for wastewater systems, stormwater management, and site layouts. Nature's Geometry demonstrates how scaling principles can enhance ecological performance. Part 2, The Ecological Design Process. Introduction, The Compost Privy Story. To ground theory and practice, this opening narrative recounts the design and construction of a composting toilet. It illustrates ecological design in action: observation, place-based iteration, ecological accounting, and learning by building. Principle 1, Solutions grow from place. Effective ecological design emerges from deep engagement with local conditions, climate, ecology, culture, and tradition. By embracing local resources and vernacular wisdom, designs feel rooted and resilient. Principle 2, Ecological accounting informs design. Here, the authors introduce ecological accounting, a rigorous analysis of resource flows, energy use, emissions, and life cycle impact. Borrowing from industrial ecology and life cycle assessment, designers can make more informed trade-offs and choose restorative designs. Principle 3, Design with Nature. This chapter offers case studies from constructed wetlands to regenerative agriculture, demonstrating how ecological systems themselves can serve as efficient infrastructure. By mimicking natural processes, designers amplify ecological intelligence. Principle 4, Everyone is a designer. Ecological problems require collective intelligence. The authors advocate participatory design, engaging all stakeholders, citizens, workers, users in the process. Inclusive collaboration yields richer insights and stronger ecological outcomes. Principle 5, Make nature visible. To foster ecological awareness and community care, designers should expose ecological processes: daylighting streams, harvesting rainwater, using living walls. Visible systems educate and integrate people into ecological cycles. Resource Guide for Ecological Design. A compendium of recommended projects, organizations, and publications, including constructed wetlands, energy-efficient buildings, and community-based initiatives. This guide offers a starting point for practitioners interested in ecological design. Bibliography and Index. Includes essential references spanning ecology, systems thinking, sustainable agriculture, industrial design, and architecture, underscoring the multidisciplinary roots of ecological design. Conclusion. In Ecological Design, 10th Anniversary Edition, Van der Rijn and Cowan offer both vision and method. Their 5 principles, rooted in place, ecological accounting, systems thinking, participation, and visibility, remain a powerful framework for sustainable design. Over the decades since publication, these ideas matured but grew in relevance, influencing architecture, urban planning, product design, and policy. The book calls for a transformation in design thinking, to see ourselves as part of nature, not apart from it. Chapter 1, Sustainability and Design, from Ecological Design, 10th Anniversary Edition by Sim van der Rin and Stuart Cowan. The opening chapter lays the philosophical and practical groundwork for the book's core mission, to redefine how we live, build, and design by aligning human activity with the self-sustaining logic of ecological systems. Rather than offering a set of technical guidelines, the authors begin with a deep critique of industrial civilization's dominant assumptions and a call for cultural, ethical, and design transformation. Hasher! The ecological crisis. The authors outline a dire but unflinching picture of the global ecological crisis. Depletion of soils, contamination of water, loss of biodiversity, reliance on fossil fuels, and climate instability are not random outcomes, but the logical consequence of a civilization organized around linear industrial systems that operate independently of ecological limits. The modern economic model treats nature as either a resource to be extracted or a waste sink to be ignored. At its core, this worldview treats the earth as a machine to be mastered, not a living system to be harmonized with. They argue that sustainability has been diluted by political and corporate interests to mean little more than more efficient business as usual. They reject superficial solutions that rely solely on technological fixes or top-down regulation, insisting that real sustainability requires a radical shift in how we design. Two competing paradigms. Van der Rin and Cowan describe two overarching paradigms of sustainability. Technocratic sustainability, a belief in expert-led high-tech interventions that manage ecological damage without questioning the industrial assumptions that caused it. This approach tends to be centralized, quantitative, and market-driven, often blind to cultural context or local feedback. Ecological sustainability, a place-based, ethical, and systemic approach rooted in humility, limits, and an understanding of interdependence. This paradigm recognizes that design is the hinge between intention and outcome, and that without rethinking design itself, no amount of regulation or efficiency will save us from collapse. The role of design. Design, they argue, is not just a profession. It's a fundamental human act that bridges intention and consequence. Everything we build, from cities to clothing, reflects values, assumptions, and understandings. Ecological design requires us to reconnect design with the processes and patterns of nature. To this end, they introduce their central thesis. Ecological design is the careful meshing of human purposes with the larger patterns and flows of the natural world. It is anticipatory, responsible, and rooted in living systems thinking. The authors push against the metaphor of the world as a machine. Instead, they advocate for design that sees the world as a web of life, complex, adaptive, nested, and participatory. The 5 core principles of ecological design. Though developed in detail later in the book, the authors offer an early preview of the 5 principles that form the philosophical scaffolding of ecological design. These are not prescriptive rules, but conceptual anchors that guide how to think and act across disciplines. 1. Solutions grow from place. Design must emerge from the ecological, cultural, and climatic context of a location. No universal blueprint can replace knowledge rooted in the textures of place, its soils, seasons, traditions, and communities. 2. Ecological accounting informs design. We must redesign decision-making to include ecological costs, energy flows, material cycles, embodied emissions, waste, and long-term system impacts. A full audit of natural and social consequences should guide every stage of design. 3. Design with nature. Rather than imposing form onto ecosystems, design should learn from and collaborate with ecological processes. This principle draws from Ian McHarg's influential work in landscape architecture and urban planning. 4. Everyone is a designer. Ecological design must be democratic and participatory. It depends on empowering individuals and communities to co-create systems that meet their needs, rather than relying on external experts to impose solutions. 5. Make nature visible. Design should reveal ecological processes rather than conceal them. By making energy, water, waste, and materials flows visible, people become more aware of their relationship with nature and more likely to act responsibly. From linear to living systems. The authors highlight how 20th century design has often mimicked industrial metaphors: efficiency, control, separation, and growth. Instead, ecological design mimics living systems, nested feedback loops, decentralized control, diversity, resilience, and regeneration. This shift in metaphor is not cosmetic. It changes everything from materials selection to energy use, to the way we value time and space. They cite examples ranging from composting toilets to permaculture, passive solar homes to community-scale water treatment, showing that viable alternatives already exist. The problem is not technological, but cultural, a failure to adopt ecological intelligence as a foundation for design. A cultural transformation. Ultimately, this chapter is not about materials or blueprints. It is about values. It asks, what is worth sustaining? What kind of future are we designing toward? Sustainability cannot be achieved through neutral metrics or isolated innovations. It requires a transformation of our design consciousness from viewing ourselves as separate from nature to understanding that we are embedded within it. The authors close by asserting that ecological design is not a niche activity or a temporary corrective. It is a new paradigm, one that integrates economy, ethics, aesthetics, and ecology into a coherent and life-affirming way of making the world. Chapter 2, An Introduction to Ecological Design. Chapter 2 serves as both a narrative bridge and conceptual foundation. Following the philosophical grounding of Chapter 1, it transitions into how ecological design actually plays out in real-world thinking and practice. Instead of merely decrying the failures of industrial design, Van der Ryn and Cowan introduce ecological design as a living practice rooted in systems thinking, iterative design, and interwoven scales, from neighborhoods to entire bioregions. Redefining design. From what to how? The authors challenge the notion that design is simply about imagining better products or cities. Real design, they assert, is deeply processual. It is about how we frame problems, who is involved, what context matters, and whose well-being is elevated. Design becomes a verb, not a noun, an ongoing conversation between people, place, and ecosystems. They also present ecological design as inherently interdisciplinary. It draws from ecology, engineering, social science, economics, art, and ethics. Effective ecological design must avoid the pitfalls of reductionism and nearsighted specialization. Instead, it must cultivate ecological literacy, enabling designers and citizens to read natural systems rather than merely shape them. Navigating scales of design. Ecological design involves multiple nested scales. Microscale, products, components, materials, how they're made, used, and disposed of. Building scale, houses, offices, schools, considering energy, water, waste, aesthetics, and health. Landscape scale, farms, watersheds, neighborhoods, integrating food, energy, transport, water cycles. Regional, biregional scale, ecological zones defined by geology, climate, water, biodiversity, and culture. Global planetary scale, planetary cycles, climate, carbon, nitrogen, economic systems, biodiversity networks. Each scale requires its own metrics, methods, and feedback loops, but they cannot remain isolated. A viable ecological design at one level must connect teleologically to broader systems and community intentions. Design as steering, not planning. The authors propose that ecological design is more akin to steering a living system than imposing a static plan. This means incrementality, implementing small testable interventions to learn and adjust. Feedback loops, monitoring systems to sense stress, threshold, and success. Adaptation and resilience, anticipating change and designing for flexibility. For example, a water retention landscape is tested in phases, adjusted based on plant growth and hydrological feedback. A community housing project evolves over seasons, not fully determined at day one. Permaculture and biomimicry as heuristics. Chapter 2 draws on permaculture, which emphasizes designing gardens, farms, and buildings that mimic patterns and relationships found in nature. Permaculture's ethics, earth care, people care, fair share, are design imperatives set alongside technique. Biomimicry is another key reference, where designers imitate natural forms and processes, from lotus leaf self-cleaning surfaces to termite-inspired cooling systems, e.g., Eastgate Building in Zimbabwe. These examples illustrate how ecological thinking looks both backward to nature and forward to innovation. Place, context, and identity. Ecological design is not generic. Instead, it hinges on a deep understanding of place, its landscape, climate, soils, hydrology, ecosystems, local culture, and history. Designs anchored in generic, placeless blueprints are more likely to fail or cause unintended damage. The authors introduce a heuristic, treating place as both classroom, learning from nature, and workshop, acting through design. The human role is to co-design with place by observing, experimenting, listening, and responding. Embracing participatory design. Chapter 2 reaffirms that everyone is a designer. Ecological outcomes depend not only on formal expertise, but on community knowledge and collective participation. Designers become process facilitators, not sole authority figures. Participatory ecological design relies on inclusive dialogue, design charrettes, apprenticeships, and community monitoring, grounding creative power in lived experience and social capital. Ethics and aesthetics. Aesthetics as ecology. Unlike conventional design that often separates beauty from function, ecological design insists that beauty is part of sustainability. Designs that feel nourishing, emotionally resonant, and culturally appropriate foster stronger stewardship. Beauty, complexity, and ecological coherence become criteria of good design. Emerging tools and methodologies. The authors introduce key ecological design tools. Ecological inventories, mapping species, water flows, soils, sun paths, microclimates. Systems diagrams, showing connections between energy flows, material cycles, social actors. Eco-cost accounting, bounding the environmental ledger, resource depletion, emissions, toxicity. Bioregional mapping, identifying watersheds, terrain, cultural landmarks, ecological zones. Pilot schemes, low-cost prototypes tested and refined based on ecological and social response. Design shifts. Mental models and mindsets. To practice ecological design, each participant or practitioner must undergo a shift from mechanistic to ecological thinking, centralized control to distributed stewardship, predetermined plans to adaptive process, uniform solutions to site-specific responses. These mental shifts enable a design culture that values diversity, decentralization, iteration, and long-term reciprocity with nature. Conclusion: a new design culture. By the end of Chapter 2, readers understand that ecological design is not merely about green buildings or renewable energy. It is about a profound shift in design culture. It is design rooted in ecology, powered by community, shaped by nature, and measured by well-being. The chapter readies the ground for the deeper dive in later chapters, where each of the 5 principles is explored through concrete case studies, such as workplaces powered by sunlight, schools built from local materials, farms designed like ecosystems, and urban landscapes that manage stormwater visibly and joyfully. Chapter 3. Nature's Geometry. In this chapter, Van der Rijn and Cowan invite us to look beyond simple functionalism and embrace the deeper patterns and geometries inherent in natural systems. They argue that ecological intelligence begins with learning nature's language, recognizing the shapes, rhythms, hierarchies, and repeating structures that permeate living systems, and using them as guides for design. Natural patterns as design teachers. The authors begin with a powerful observation. Nature is inherently geometric. From expanding spiral shells to branching trees and undulating coastlines, recurring forms, fractals, spirals, branching, networks, concentric patterns are both efficient and resilient. These lessons in geometry offer more than aesthetic inspiration. They embody long-tested strategies for distributing energy and optimizing resources. One striking example is fractal geometry, repeated patterns at different scales, found in clouds, root systems, mountain ranges. Fractals optimize exchange surfaces and structural stability, informing innovations in architecture, water systems, air handling, and building detail. The chapter emphasizes that these designs are not ornamental but highly functional. Scale and nested systems. Nature is hierarchical and nested. Cells form tissues, tissues form organs, organs form organisms, organisms form ecosystems, and ecosystems form landscapes and bioregions. Each scale exhibits its own logic, yet they are interconnected. Human design must respect and replicate this nesting, rather than create isolated objects imposed on nature. Good ecological design embeds multiple scales. Windows operate like stomata. Buildings function like trees. Neighborhoods function like forests. Regions mimic watersheds. Learning to think in nested systems is essential for resilience and efficiency. Networks, flow, and circulation. Chapter 3 emphasizes that life is based on flow. Water, nutrients, energy, organisms all move through networks. Rivers, veins, mycorrhiza. These systems evolve to move matter and energy efficiently. Understanding them helps designers create better circulatory systems in our infrastructure. Water harvesting swales, nutrient loops, transportation grids. Each can mimic natural circulation patterns. Rather than linear inputs, e.g. truck in, truck out, ecological design demands closed loops and distributed flow. Economy of materials. Natural systems are winners in minimization and multiplication. They use local materials, prioritize regeneration, and favor adaptable reuse over wasteful disposal. Shells dissolve into soil, leaves become compost. There is no throwaway. Designs inspired by this principle might include modular buildings, biodegradable materials, and systems that repair themselves, far beyond single-use plastics or demolition-based construction. Adaptive form. Unlike fixed, static machines, living systems grow, adapt, self-repair, and evolve. Ecosystems burn and reburn, species shift ranges, fire followers emerge. Chapter 3 emphasizes that ecological design embraces adaptability. Buildings can breathe and flex. Landscapes can flood and regreen. Communities can reorganize. Examples include buildings that can be disassembled, wetlands that filter water and buffer floods, and communities that act like ecosystems, regenerating and evolving over time. Living systems are governed by loops, feedback systems that balance processes. Predators keep prey in check. Plants shade soil. Water cycles regulate temperature. Human designs, too, should operate with feedback. Sensors, community monitoring, ecological indicators. Mimicking natural feedback empowers systems to stay within thresholds. Irrigation adapts to soil moisture. Energy systems self-adjust. Buildings react to light, wind, temperature. Synthesis in form. Rather than copying surface biomimetic features, true ecological design integrates form and function. The geometry of design should be inseparable from its purpose. Water flows in spirals because it's hydrodynamically efficient. Walls curve to provide structure. Porosity allows ventilation. The chapter includes examples such as biomorphic wetlands, buildings with living skins, and urban block structures patterned like forests, all employing nature's grammar. Case examples. Although the book avoids technical minutiae, Chapter 3 references restored marshes, redesigned to show tidal channels in fractal geometry, improving habitat and storm management, wetland-based wastewater treatment, living machines, systems of tanks and plant communities designed to replicate natural filtration, passive solar buildings whose orientation, chimney placement, and overhangs follow sun angles and seasonal geometry, road design, based on snake paths rather than rigid grids, balancing travel efficiency with topography and ecological flow. These illustrate how ecological form emerges from observation of place, data, and nature's strategies, not from imposing mechanical grids. Shift in paradigm. Ultimately, Chapter 3 calls for a radical shift in design thinking, from objects to patterns, from uniformity to diversity, from conformity to adaptation, from domination to integration. In doing so, it connects the ideas of the first two chapters with concrete principles that will be explored in subsequent case studies and principles chapters. Conclusion. Nature's geometry is not decoration. It is the intelligence embedded in living systems, the outcome of billions of years of evolution and adaptation. By learning to see and use fractals, networks, feedback, nesting, and adaptive form, ecological designers can create infrastructure, landscapes, buildings, and communities that are not only functional, but alive. Chapter 4, Introduction, the Compost Privy Story. In Chapter 4, van der Rijn and Cowan begin Part 2, the ecological design process, using the compost privy, an ecological toilet that cleans human waste through natural processes, as their entry point. Unlike conventional designs, the compost privy embodies all 5 principles of ecological design in a practical, low-tech system that is socially inclusive, ecologically regenerative, and context-driven. Why the compost privy? The authors chose the privy as a compelling illustration of ecological design in action, where typical septic systems or pit latrines consume energy and water, rely on synthetic treatment chemicals, hide waste, harm groundwater. The compost privy recycles waste, uses no energy, and engages people in natural cycles. The toilet has 2 chambers. Once the first is full, it is capped and left to decompose into safe compost while the second is used. Over time, this regenerative process converts human excreta into nutrient-rich humus to fertilize soils.
Yes.
Applying the 5 principles. 1. Solutions grow from place. Composting toilets vary depending on climate, soil type, local soils, seasonal water availability, and community customs. A privy in the Pacific Northwest differs in ventilation and design from one in a tropical region. The user's local environment shapes the details. 2. Ecological accounting informs design. Instead of spending water or energy, the privy operates passively. Inputs, outputs, and life cycle impacts are deliberately accounted for. Waste becomes resource, closing the loop. 3. Design with nature. The private ecosystem of the privy relies on biological decomposition, the activity of microbes, worms, and insects to transform waste. The design mimics leaf litter decomposition or wood rotting fungi, not chemical treatment. 4. Everyone is a designer. Users and caretakers are not passive recipients. They participate in operation, monitoring, and maintenance. Education materials and simple signage empower people to steward the process. They learn about decomposition, resource conversion, sanitation, and hygiene. 5. Make nature visible. The privy makes ecological cycles visible and comprehensible. It sensitizes people to nutrient cycles, waste flows, and regeneration. Platforms, signage, or viewing windows allow curiosity and trust to grow. Robustness and human experience. The compost privy works quietly. No pumps or chemicals, no electric grid reliance. It thrives on simple ventilation, passive airflow, and natural microbial digestion. The user experience is rich, from the tactile feel of the wooden seat and the natural materials used to understanding how human waste nourishes the soil after merely a year. The writers note that many users report a sense of empowerment and reconnection with living systems. The toilet becomes a site of learning, not shame. Cultural and social context. Ecological design always operates within cultural context. In some cultures, handling waste can be taboo. In others, recycling it as fertilizer is traditional. Successful projects across North America, Europe, and Africa respect local traditions and build on existing understandings, rather than imposing unfamiliar, ideal designs. Van der Rijn and Cowan recount case studies, community-built compost privies in rural schools, suburban backyard models, even public toilets in parks. All rely on user education, design transparency, local materials, and integrated systems thinking. Systemic transformation and scale. The compost privy is deceptively simple, but its implications are profound. Its methodology can be applied elsewhere. Landscape-level composting systems, closed-loop nutrient systems in urban farming, gray water reuse in constructed wetlands, community-scaled waste processing infrastructures. By learning from this humble design, students, planners, and engineers can re-envision sanitation systems as regenerative ecosystems. Emerging design insights. The chapter introduces foundational design heuristics later applied in deeper principles. Design locally, not generically. Account ecologically, not financially only. Work with nature, not against it. Engage people, even in messy contexts like toilets. Reveal process, not hide it. In showing how these are deeply embedded in the compost privy, the chapter clarifies how ecological design operates day to day, at ground level, with profound implications. Broader takeaway. Where industrial design obfuscates and outsources ecological harm, the compost privy does the opposite. It exposes cycles, connects people with place, regenerates ecosystems, and invites participation. It brings ecological intelligence into everyday life and reconceives a basic human need, sanitation, as an opportunity for ecological learning and resource renewal. The story sets the stage for the remaining chapters, each of which examines a principle of ecological design in depth, using case studies across architecture, agriculture, water management, energy, and community planning. Chapter 4, Introduction, the Compost Privy Story. In Chapter 4, van der Ryn and Cowan begin Part 2, the ecological design process, using the compost privy, an ecological toilet that cleans human waste through natural processes, as their entry point. Unlike conventional designs, the compost privy embodies all 5 principles of ecological design in a practical, low-tech system that is socially inclusive, ecologically regenerative, and context-driven. Why the compost privy? The authors chose the privy as a compelling illustration of ecological design in action, where typical septic systems or pit latrines consume energy and water, rely on synthetic treatment chemicals, hide waste, harm groundwater. The compost privy recycles waste, uses no energy, and engages people in natural cycles. The toilet has 2 chambers. Once the first is full, it is capped and left to decompose into safe compost while the second is used. Over time, this regenerative process converts human excreta into nutrient-rich humus to fertilize soils.
Yes.
Applying the 5 principles. 1. Solutions grow from place. Composting toilets vary depending on climate, soil type, local soils, seasonal water availability, and community customs. A privy in the Pacific Northwest differs in ventilation and design from one in a tropical region. The user's local environment shapes the details. 2. Ecological accounting informs design. Instead of spending water or energy, the privy operates passively. Inputs, outputs, and life cycle impacts are deliberately accounted for. Waste becomes resource, closing the loop. 3. Design with nature. The private ecosystem of the privy relies on biological decomposition, the activity of microbes, worms, and insects to transform waste. The design mimics leaf litter decomposition or wood-rotting fungi, not chemical treatment. 4. Everyone is a designer. Users and caretakers are not passive recipients. They participate in operation, monitoring, and maintenance. Education materials and simple signage empower people to steward the process. They learn about decomposition, resource conversion, sanitation, and hygiene. 5. Make nature visible. The privy makes ecological cycles visible and comprehensible. It sensitizes people to nutrient cycles, waste flows, and regeneration. Platforms, signage, or viewing windows allow curiosity and trust to grow. Robustness and human experience. The compost privy works quietly. No pumps or chemicals, no electric grid reliance. It thrives on simple ventilation, passive airflow, and natural microbial digestion. The user experience is rich, from the tactile feel of the wooden seat and the natural materials used to understanding how human waste nourishes the soil after merely a year. The writers note that many users report a sense of empowerment and reconnection with living systems. The toilet becomes a site of learning, not shame. Cultural and social context. Ecological design always operates within cultural context. In some cultures, handling waste can be taboo. In others, recycling it as fertilizer is traditional. Successful projects across North America, Europe, and Africa respect local traditions and build on existing understandings, rather than imposing unfamiliar, ideal designs. Van der Ryn and Cowan recount case studies. Community-built compost privies in rural schools, suburban backyard models, even public toilets in parks. All rely on user education, design transparency, local materials, and integrated systems thinking. Systemic transformation and scale. The compost privy is deceptively simple, but its implications are profound. Its methodology can be applied elsewhere. Landscape-level composting systems, closed-loop nutrient systems in urban farming, gray water reuse in constructed wetlands, community-scaled waste processing infrastructures. By learning from this humble design, students, planners, and engineers can re-envision sanitation systems as regenerative ecosystems. Emerging design insights. The chapter introduces foundational design heuristics later applied in deeper principles. Design locally, not generically. Account ecologically, not financially only. Work with nature, not against it. Engage people, even in messy contexts like toilets. Reveal process, not hide it. In showing how these are deeply embedded in the compost privy, the chapter clarifies how ecological design operates day to day, at ground level, with profound implications. Broader takeaway. Where industrial design obfuscates and outsources ecological harm, the compost privy does the opposite. It exposes cycles, connects people with place, regenerates ecosystems, and invites participation. It brings ecological intelligence into everyday life and reconceives a basic human need, sanitation, as an opportunity for ecological learning and resource renewal. The story sets the stage for the remaining chapters, each of which examines a principle of ecological design in depth, using case studies across architecture, agriculture, water management, energy, and community planning. Chapter 5, First Principle, Solutions Grow from Place. Embracing place-based design. Chapter 5 pivots from ecological theory to grounded application, spotlighting the first core principle. Solutions grow from place. Van der Rijn and Cowan argue that genuine ecological design must emerge organically from the specific ecological, cultural, and material conditions of a site, much like an oak emerges from an acorn. They emphasize that indigenous and vernacular architectures, whether mud brick desert villages, stilted tropical huts, log cabins in temperate forests, or yurts in the Asian steppe, have evolved precisely as responses to climate, materials, and local customs. These are not relics of tradition alone, but rich archives of ecological intelligence. Place matters. Designs rooted in arbitrary templates or globalized forms often fail environmental and social objectives. Generic approaches can demand excessive resources, ignore vernacular wisdom, introduce ecological harm, and erase local identity. In contrast, place-based design enhances resilience, cultural integrity, and efficiency. As the chapter puts it, systems optimized for local rainfall, local materials, and local labor reduce ecological costs and create healthy, vibrant habitats. Tools for place-based design. The authors suggest practical methods for tuning design to place. Bioregional mapping. Understanding the watershed, climate, flora, fauna, soils, and local culture that shape a region. Ecological inventories. Documenting sunlight, wind, water flow, temperature patterns, plant and animal habitats. Material assessment. Identifying readily available resources, straw, bamboo, stone, clay, waste materials, and local craftsmanship. These tools allow designers to use what's on site instead of importing energy-intensive materials. Case study, Blueprint Farm, Laredo, Texas. One compelling example is the Blueprint Farm near Laredo, built using local steel drill stems, straw bale infill, calish, and local lime. Catchment systems harvest rainfall. Wind energy powers pumps. Cooling towers use passive shading systems. It relies on local farmers and craftsmen, minimizing ecological and social costs while enriching the local economy. Sites Unturned search. This case illustrates how responding to local needs and conditions engages ecological efficiency and community participation. Case study, Odi School, California. On a school campus near Santa Barbara, buildings are aligned to solar angles, constructed with rotational timber and shaded courtyards. This design demonstrates how climate-driven form can improve comfort, education, and energy efficiency. Architecture becomes a tool for place-conscious living. Search. 8. Culture, tradition, and community. Place is as much cultural as ecological. Local stories, skills, spiritual values, dietary customs, and conflict resolution traditions all shape design. The authors argue that tapping into this cultural capital builds trust and embeds new systems within existing ways of life. Ignoring cultural context risks producing alienated spaces, soulless, poorly used, or resisted by residents. Linking scales with place designs that grow from place connect scales. A roof that collects rainwater connects building and watershed. Local materials link product architecture to community and landscape. Courtyards and pathways knit structures into cultural patterns of movement and gathering. Working with place synchronizes the molecular level of materials with the architectural, ecological, and bioregional scales of a community. Common mistakes to avoid. The authors caution against placeless design, dropping suburban tract homes into any terrain, applying energy-efficient technologies without local calibration, importing mass-produced components that ignore local production capacity. These choices all disconnect design from place, escalate resource use, and risk long-term failure. Key takeaways. Deep knowledge of land, climate, culture, and materials is the only sound starting point. Local resources and labor create resilience, economic opportunity, and ecological integrity. Solutions that grow from place regenerate identity and foster stewardship. Architectural and infrastructural designs must align with bioregional systems to ensure longevity and meaning. Chapters role in the book. Chapter 5 transitions the book from theory to methodology, introducing tools and examples that make ecological design actionable. It sets the stage for the remaining chapters, each of which explores the next 4 principles: ecological accounting, designing with nature, participatory design, and transparency. By anchoring design in local realities, the authors show that ecological design is not an ideal, but an imperative, a means of living well in specific places without undermining their life-giving processes. Chapter 6, Second Principle. Ecological accounting informs design. The necessity of ecological accounting. Chapter 6 introduces the second principle of ecological design, ecological accounting. The authors argue that traditional design often ignores the hidden environmental costs, or externalities, of human systems, leading to decisions that damage ecosystems, public health, and future generations. To create truly sustainable designs, all resource flows and ecosystem impacts must be measured, quantified, and made central to the design process. Understanding externalities. Much environmental damage, from pollution to resource depletion, is passed off as a free cost, external to economic systems. Coal, gas, and oil, for example, emit pollutants like mercury, CO2, sulfur, and nitrogen without reflecting these costs in their prices. Ecological accounting makes these hidden costs visible and quantifiable, enabling design decisions that internalize environmental impacts rather than ignore them. Tracking resource flows. To practice ecological accounting, the authors advocate following material and energy flows from source to end of life. They cite a student design project on a San Francisco youth hostel that mapped 6 key resource areas: electricity, water, waste, sewage, recycling, and natural gas, to understand impacts and inform change. Such inventories help identify high-impact areas and opportunities for intervention. Cite Turn Search. Tools for ecological audit designers can use numerous tools. Life cycle analysis, LCA, to assess environmental impacts every stage. Material flow diagrams, showing the journey of resources from extraction to disposal. Environmental benchmarks, such as allowable carbon emissions, water use per unit, or biodiversity indices. Mapping systems, such as watershed boundaries and soil types, to detect cumulative impacts across scales. Through such tools, design can be rooted in evidence rather than intuition, exposing trade-offs and pointing toward preventive, regenerative action. Case study, Green Hostel. An ecological design studio in San Francisco mapped resource flows at a hostel, uncovering inefficiencies in water, energy, waste, and sewage that would have otherwise gone unnoticed. Their ecological audit led to practical design suggestions, like reduced water consumption and better recycling systems. Cite Turn Search 4. This hands-on exercise showcased how ecological awareness, even at microscales, can ground design in material reality. Systemic approach to resource use. Van der Ryn and Cowan extend the rationale beyond buildings to landscapes, communities, infrastructures, products, and food systems. Electricity should be measured not only in usage but in generation impacts. Water systems should be assessed for watershed health. Food systems must account for embedded energy and emissions. A composting toilet, for instance, generates no chemical pollution, conserves water, and returns nutrients, clearly outperforming conventional septic systems. Cite Turn Search 11, linking with other principles. Ecological accounting closely connects with other principles. It relies on place-specific inventories. Principle 1. Guides design with nature by revealing ecological thresholds and system capacities. Principle 3. Supports participation by making resource data transparent and democratic. Principle 4. Requires visibility, showing ecological flows in user experience. Principle 5. Through accounting, designers gain essential information to apply nature-based solutions, resource cycles, and participatory feedback loops. Common pitfalls. The chapter warns against overuse of improvements that seem green but lack accounting, e.g. installing solar panels without measuring energy returns or life cycle impacts. Greenwashing, making claims without reporting real ecological data. implementing technology-only solutions that ignore broader ecosystem or community effects. Practical takeaways. To embed ecological accountability. 1. Inventory material and energy flows at every stage. 2. Set ecological targets, limits for water, carbon, waste, or biodiversity loss. 3. Compare design options using ecological metrics, not just cost. 4. Reassess and monitor over time, updating designs with feedback. Shifting design culture. Chapter 6 argues that ecological accounting transforms design from aesthetics or function first to responsibility first. It quantifies ethics, giving ecological intelligence concrete metrics. When flows are accounted, designers begin to favor systems that regenerate. Rainwater capture, on-site energy, composting systems, biomaterials, and avoid ecological debt. Through ecological accounting, design becomes aligned with planetary boundaries, not merely optimized for human convenience. It is a bridge between values and results. In summary, ecological accounting is the invisible spine of ecological design. Without it, even beautiful or innovative projects can perpetuate damage. With it, every decision is evaluated through ecological lens, aligning design with the lived world, not detached abstractions. Chapter 7, Third Principle, Designing with Nature. Embracing nature's wisdom. Chapter 7 introduces the core dictum, design with nature, exploring how our built environments, infrastructure, and systems can collaborate with living processes instead of resisting them. Contrary to conventional control and conquer strategies, ecological design seeks harmony. It functions by observing, imitating, and integrating ecological dynamics. From domination to partnership. Industrial design often treats natural systems as obstacles, harnessed, diverted, or suppressed. Van der Rijn and Cowan argue for a different ontology. Ecosystems are not adversaries but partners, offering engineering insights honed over eons. Effective ecological design takes nature off the shelf and makes it a collaborator. The nature of resilience. Natural ecosystems evolve resilience through diversity, redundancy, and feedback. Forests recover from wildfire. Wetlands absorb floods. Soil rebuilds after disturbance. By framing infrastructure and architecture as adaptive ecosystems, designers can create systems that self-heal and maintain balance, rather than requiring constant human control. Case study: the Eastgate Center, Harare. The Eastgate Center in Zimbabwe exemplifies design with nature. Architects Christopher Alexander and Mick Pierce used termite mounds as inspiration to develop a natural cooling system. With passive ventilation chimneys and thermal mass walls, the building uses 90% less energy for cooling than conventional offices. This biomimetic design leverages termite colony strategies for homeostasis. Integrated water management. Constructed wetlands and bioswales are shown as elegant, multifunctional infrastructure. They treat wastewater, recharge groundwater, increase biodiversity, and provide habitat, all while using little energy. These systems demonstrate how ecological design can reconcile built environments with hydrological cycles in a regenerative manner. Rewilding infrastructure. The authors describe ecological bridges and wildlife corridors that reconnect fragmented landscapes for animals and plants. These green infrastructure elements, spanning over highways, railway lines, and watercourses, reflect ecological form and function, supporting genetic diversity and ecosystem health alongside human mobility. Natural materials and processes. The chapter encourages using biomaterials, hempcrete, straw bale, rammed earth, mycelium, each locally grown and compostable, renewable carbon cycles, waste-to-resource strategies, and the use of living walls and roofs illustrate how buildings themselves can become functioning ecosystems. Adaptive landscaping. Designing with nature means cultivating landscapes that evolve. Instead of manicured lawns or exotic plantings, ecological gardens follow successional planting strategies. Pioneer species establish first, followed by understory and canopy layers, mimicking forest growth and improving resource efficiency over time. Multi-scale feedback loops. Natural systems rely on nested feedback loops. Resolute designers must incorporate sensing and response mechanisms at different scales. Sensors adjust irrigation and ventilation. Communities monitor ecosystem health. policies adjust based on observed outcomes. This mirrors how ecosystems respond to disturbance and adapt. Co-design with non-human agents. Chapter 7 argues that ecological design must include non-human stakeholders, soil organisms, insects, birds, plants. Rather than treating nature as a backdrop, design should invite non-humans into the decision process by planning habitats, resource patches, corridors, and nesting opportunities. Pitfalls to avoid. Imposing unnatural systems that fragment natural flows, e.g. storm drains, concrete channels, artificial lighting. Treating nature superficially, as decoration rather than system. Using biomorphic forms that look natural without functioning so. True design with nature is not about aesthetics. It is about translating ecological functions into resilient infrastructure. The bigger picture. As the third principle, designing with nature forms a bridge between local design and global ecology by using natural processes, water capture, biological filtration, renewable materials. The book demonstrates how every design choice can support broader ecological balance and remove pressure on ecosystem services. This is not utopian. It operates through pragmatism, designs that save energy, reduce waste, increase comfort and health, and remain robust under ecological stress. Summary. Key takeaways. Treat nature as designer and partner, not obstacle. Harness ecosystem strategies, adaptability, feedback, resilience. Use biomimicry pragmatically, aligned with local ecological context. Reconnect infrastructures, water, transport, sanitation with natural cycles. Design buildings and landscapes that evolve, heal, and support life for humans and non-humans. Chapter 7 makes clear that design with nature is neither nostalgic nor decorative. It is a working strategy to build infrastructures that regenerate, adapt, and delight. This principle underpins the next chapters, where stakeholder engagement, transparency, and co-creative processes weave ecological design into lived environments. Chapter 8, fourth principle, everyone is a designer. Democratizing design. Chapter 8 presents the fourth foundational principle of ecological design. Everyone is a designer. Van der Rijn and Cowan argue that sustainability cannot be achieved by elite experts alone. Instead, design must become a collaborative, inclusive process where people of all backgrounds actively shape the systems and spaces they depend on. Ecological design is reframed not as an exclusive professional domain, but as a shared cultural dialogue. Who shapes a neighborhood, school, or farm matters, because design choices reflect values and needs. By empowering local voices, ecological design becomes accountable, culturally rooted, and social. Participation as ecological practice. True sustainability requires decentralized decision-making. Co-design workshops and community charrettes bring together planners, residents, children, elders, farmers, businesses, each contributing unique insights and deep local knowledge. These sessions foster shared ownership, build capacity, and create designs that reflect collective experiences, lifestyles, and aspirations. Rather than imposing expert assumptions, this process builds resilience through social cohesion and mutual learning. Valuing local knowledge. The authors highlight the importance of traditional ecological knowledge, the know-how embedded in vernacular architecture, farming methods, seasonal rhythms, craft traditions, and resource stewardship passed down over generations. These practices offer adapted, tested solutions that professionals cannot replicate. Ecological design listens first. It doesn't impose. Acknowledging this knowledge means respecting elders, indigenous cultures, and those whose daily lives depend on ecological fluency. It also means recognizing the cognitive and ethical limits of abstract design alone. Designers as facilitators. In this principle, professional designers step back from being masters of form and move toward process facilitators, translating local aspirations into technical coherence. They frame problems and present options, but leave room for communities to shape outcomes. Their job is to help people tackle trade-offs, not define a fixed best answer. Learning design through doing. The chapter encourages learning by making. Schoolyard gardens designed and built by students. Farmers co-creating water retention earthworks. Residents collaborating to retrofit homes. These tangible experiences empower participants to see how design reflects their values and how they can change it. They transform passive beneficiaries into active stewards. Case studies in participation. Although ecological design does not present long technical case narratives, it repeatedly emphasizes projects that thrive through local involvement. School building, where teachers, students, parents, and architects co-created classroom layouts, passive temperature control, and site planting. Community farming or agroforestry projects, where neighbors mapped flows of water, compost, shade, and labor. Local wastewater systems, where residents managed composting toilets or constructed wetlands together, gaining shared responsibility and insight. Each project becomes a classroom, workshop, and public exhibit in one. Building social capital. This principle underscores that ecological design is as much social architecture as it is physical. Participation builds social capital, trust, networks, shared norms, essential for managing common goods, maintaining infrastructure, and spreading ecological awareness. Trust-based communities can care for landscapes, maintain bioswales, manage greywater systems, and negotiate inclusive land use far more effectively than top-down systems. Avoiding tokenism. The authors caution against hollow consultations that tick boxes but ignore meaningful input. One-off surveys or public hearings don't empower. Professionals dominating decisions while offering little feedback distorts intent. Surface-level participation avoids real co-creation. Authentic design with people requires shared power and transparent processes. Connection to other principles. Place. Local communities know their land best. Accounting. Residents can monitor resource performance. Design with nature. Local ecological habits matter. Seeing nature. Users learn through seeing water and life systems at work. Participation is the essential human interface linking all ecological design principles. Democratic beauty and stewardship. When people design their own environments, shaping gardens, buildings, parks, they tend to cherish and maintain them. People care for what they build. They teach others. They inspire neighbors. In doing so, ecological consciousness multiplies. Beauty becomes social as well as ecological. Stewardship becomes collective, not delegated. Key takeaways. Design is a shared endeavor, not just professional. Participation builds ownership, resilience, knowledge, and care. Valuing local knowledge reveals rooted ecological intelligence. Designers become facilitators, supporting rather than dictating. Social processes are design tools. Trust, cohesion, ongoing dialogue matter as much as drawings. Chapter in context. Chapter 8 deepens the book's trajectory from ecological theory to practical transformation. It shows that democratic participation isn't optional. It's fundamental. Ecological design works only where people design with, not merely for, the land and each other. The forthcoming Chapter 9, Make Nature Visible, expands on how ecological systems continue to educate and connect people through perceptible design. Chapter 9, Fifth Principle, Make Nature Visible. Revealing ecological processes. In this chapter, Vanderin and Cowan emphasize that ecological design must not only embed sustainability behind the scenes, it must also make natural systems visible, so people can perceive, learn from, and engage with living processes in their everyday environment. This visibility builds ecological literacy and fosters active stewardship. Why visibility matters. Understanding through observation. When sunlight, water, waste, or materials are revealed, people grasp their place within natural cycles. Behavioral change. Visible systems, such as compost piles or rain gardens, encourage users to adopt more sustainable habits. Emotional and spiritual connection. Seeing ecological systems at work cultivates a sense of belonging to nature rather than separation from it. Strategies for making nature visible. 1. Expose natural flows and cycles. Use transparent piping to show rainwater collecting or plant waste breaking down. Raised beds, visible compost layers, and clear channels for runoff make ecological processes tangible. 2. Integrate living systems in design. Constructed wetlands, green facades, and butterfly gardens invite biodiversity into daily life. These systems function ecologically while delighting the senses. 3. Use interpretive design elements. Signage, markers, color codes, or simple guides can help users detect seasonal shifts, energy use, and resource flows. Interpretive art also tells ecological stories. 4. Align built form with natural rhythms. Buildings oriented to reveal sun angles, wind corridors channeled into shaded courtyards, or paths that trace local hydrology make environmental conditions perceptible and purposeful. Case examples. Real Goods Trading Company, Hopland, CA, incorporates constructed marshes that clean wastewater, nurture wildlife, and let people walk alongside resource flows. Living Machine at Rhode Island. Transparent tanks filled with plants, microbes, fish, and snails process sewage in full public view, turning sanitation into a visible ecological spectacle. Site Turn Search 4. Educational schoolyards and campuses use bioswales, daylighting water channels, compost stations, and weather monitoring instruments to integrate scientific curiosity with landscape design. Social and educational benefits. When ecological systems are exposed, learning replaces abstraction. Users, especially children, develop hands-on ecological thinking. Civic engagement grows. Communities become champions of local ecosystems, cleaning channels, planting native gardens, hosting eco-demo tours. Multiple intelligences are activated. Sight, sound, smell, and tactile interaction deepen ecological empathy and awareness of living systems. Common pitfalls. Systems hidden underground or behind walls maintain invisibility, perpetuating disconnection. Greenwashing tactics may display token plants or ribbons without functioning systems. Decorative imitations of ecological forms fail to deliver purpose or learning. True visibility requires structure and function, not only aesthetic appeal. Design principles in practice. Encourage engagement. For example, rooftop rain tanks with visible levels and garden overflow point encourage user interaction. Embed transparency. Use glass surfaces or cutaways to let people observe root growth, composting heat, or water filtration. Convey system rhythm. Seasonal planting beds, sunpath indicators, and bioindicators, e.g. dragonflies at wetlands, show ecological time and variation. Linking to earlier principles. Visibility depends on first knowing place. Principle 1. Accounting for resources. 2. Working with nature. 3. And inviting participation. The visible ecological design becomes a civic classroom, reinforcing cultural values and biological knowledge. Final reflections. Making nature visible transforms passive recipients into active learners and protectors. It shifts design from covert functionality to public ecological literacy. When people see the cycles they inhabit, they are more likely to respect and sustain them. This chapter concludes the principles section by demonstrating how ecological design can educate, delight, and inspire, turning houses, schools, and cities into media for living systems. The Resource Guide in Ecological Design 10th Anniversary Edition isn't a standalone chapter, but a practical toolkit that follows the 9 foundational chapters. It delivers immediately applicable strategies, references, and guidance to help designers, educators, community leaders, and planners turn ecological design principles into real-world impact. What the Resource Guide offers. 1. Checklists and worksheets. Bioregional inventory forms for cataloging local soils, climate, hydrology, flora, fauna, materials, and cultural practices. Resource flow audit templates to document energy, water, waste, and emissions in buildings or landscapes. Participatory design tools for stakeholder mapping, workshop planning, consensus building, feedback collection. 2. Design tools and methods. Guides to Life Cycle Analysis, LCA, for products and systems, including a list of software tools and reference databases. Examples of material quantity tracking for sensitive ecological budgeting, e.g., 1 liter of water saved equals X kilograms of CO2 avoided. Metrics and standards like embodied energy per square meter, water footprint calculators, and local biodiversity indicators. 3. Case studies and application examples. Summaries of successful ecological design projects worldwide, connecting the 5 principles to tangible solutions like ecological schools, river restoration parks, graywater wetlands, and habitat-integrated farms. Diagrams and photos illustrating how principles were applied at various scales, from rainwater harvesting homes to eco-campus master plans. 4. Project planning framework. Recommended stages: site analysis, stakeholder engagement, ecological accounting, design iteration, prototyping, monitoring, adaptation. Timelines and team roles for interdisciplinary collaboration: ecologists, architects, engineers, artists, educators, local residents. 5. Further reading and resources. Annotated bibliography covering ecology, landscape architecture, biomimicry, permaculture, systems thinking, community development, indigenous design. Links to open source standards and guides, including regional habitat plans, watershed delineation manuals, green building rating systems compatible with ecological design thinking. 6. Teaching and learning materials. Classroom exercises, mapping food webs, creating compost experiments, drawing fractal forms, designing visible nature nodes. Project-based activity templates tailored for K-12, university courses, professional workshops, and community forums. 7. Advocacy and communication resources. Strategies for crafting effective pitches to community boards, policymakers, and funders, using visuals, ecological metrics, and social engagement impact. Sample communication tools, signage examples, interpretive scripts, and social media posts designed to make ecological systems compelling and participatory. Why it matters. This resource guide elevates ecological design from philosophical treatise to hands-on playbook. It bridges theory and practice with step-by-step workflows, enables practitioners to implement the 5 design principles across scales, fosters ecological literacy and empowerment across communities, facilitates evaluation and monitoring of ecological impact, helps institutionalize ecological design in policy, planning, and education. How you can use it. Depending on your role, designer, educator, community organizer, you can use the inventory and accounting templates to kickstart design projects grounded in local context. Run interactive design charrettes with real stakeholders, informed by the participatory schematics. Adapt teaching units for classrooms or public workshops that likely extend beyond traditional environmental education. Connect with partner organizations using the annotated bibliography and resource links. Ultimately, the resource guide makes ecological design doable and scalable, providing the glue that turns ecological wisdom into resilient, regenerative, and culturally meaningful places. A heartfelt light. To every soul whose hand did give, you've helped me dream, helped me live. In darkest hours your light came through, with hearts so kind, so pure, so true. Your gifts, like stars in deepest night, have steered me gently toward the light. Each coin, each word, each silent prayer, a thread of hope, so rich, so rare. My eyes once dimmed now seek the skies, and slowly, clearer visions rise. Because of you, I dare to see the world again. Its grace, its plea. Your compassion's flame will not just stay with me alone. It lights the way for others wandering through despair to feel the warmth of selfless care. You've shown what love in action means, in quiet ways through giving scenes. You've built a bridge from soul to soul and made the broken feel more whole. So let this thanks rise like a song, a melody both soft and strong. May your example gently call more hearts to rise to give. To fall into the joy of lifting pain, of planting hope where none remains. Your kindness walks beside me still, a light, a love, a living will.
forget to hit that subscribe button to show your support.